hold on to your seat because Carpinteria transportation is on the fast track. Thus, that's why we're here this morning. We're going to find out some great things that the city of Carpinteria is doing. Carpinteria had the vision, they had the policy, so when the funding and everything was just right, we have instant results. So right now you're going to hear a lot of things that are going on, air, plane, train, bikes, every method of transportation. So hold on to your seat. Thank you for getting on board with us this morning to learn the ins and outs about our local transportation. This morning we have 9 stellar speakers consisting of Senator Hannah-Beth Jackson, City of Carpinteria Mayor Fred Shaw, City Manager Dave Derflinger, Ed Franz from the SB Bicycle Coalition, Hazel Johns from the City of Santa Barbara Airport, Jerry Estrada from MTD, Margie Kern, Greg Hart, Kent Epperson, and Mike Becker from SBCAG. So obviously we have a fantastic lineup and they all have so many great things to share. Today was made possible by our generous sponsors, the City of Santa Barbara Airport, Jack's Bistro and Famous Bagels, Meister and Noons PC, Montecito Bank and Trust, Santa Barbara Metropolitan Transit District, and Santa Barbara County Association of Governments. It's just in case you don't know what MTD and SBCAG stands for. When I first came here, I was like, what's this, what's that? So I just wanted to spell that out for you this morning. We want to give a special shout out to Osa Olson with the Alcazar Theater. Let's give her a big round of applause. I also would like to give Dr. Birkenmeyer, he's up front here. He is a dentist by day and a techie guru by night. He's been just really instrumental in helping put together 10 PowerPoints, videos, and coordinating it all. So thank you, Bob. This morning we have the honor of having many elected officials here with us, and I would like to acknowledge again our elected officials and their representatives, Senator Hannah-Beth Jackson, District Representative, and her District Representative Brad Hudson, First District Supervisor Doss Williams, and his Ledge Rep Ashley Cruzel. We have Mayor Fred Shaw, the City Manager Dave Derflinger. We have Chris Henson representing Congressman Salud Carbajal, Johnny Vasquez representing Assembly Member Monique Limon, and Al Clark, City of Carpinteria Council Member and SBCAG Director. This also would not be made possible without this fabulous committee that we've had, kind of talking about transportation and really getting excited about it. And right now I would like to acknowledge some of our board members that are here that were also on that committee. Caroline Alarcon, if you want to just stand and stay standing and we'll do applause afterwards. Caroline Alarcon is our board chairwoman and also on the transportation committee. Dr. Roland Rotz from Lifespan Development Center. Shelley Noons, CPA, the secretary, and on our board and the transportation committee of Meister and Noons PC. Dr. Brian Falk, he's our secretary of our board from Unified Medicine and also a Transportation Summit committee member. Anthony Castillo from Alliance Wealth Strategies. Anthony. Dave Derflinger, city manager, sits on our board of directors. Please stand. Doralee Jacobson from Jack's Bistro and Famous Bagels. I think she's in the back. Wonderful bagels this morning, right? And there's plenty out there, so please, if you need a break, don't hesitate to go out and refresh. Danita Rodriguez, Superintendent of California State Parks and Channel Coast District. We have Monica Solarzano from UC Santa Barbara, and she also is on the Transportation Committee. Paul Wright from Island Brewing. Paul. And Daniel, our ambassador, Daniel Estrada from Montecito Bank and Trust, also one of our sponsors this morning. So thank you. Let's give them all a round of applause. Great. So next, we're going to get right into this program. I'm going to introduce Senator Hannah-Beth Jackson. She is our very first speaker. We are going to take questions and answers afterwards. You should have all received this little get up when you came in. So if you don't have a question and you want to use it for notes on the back, you're able to do that. But we will be collecting these note cards at the top of SBCAG's presentation. So a little bit about Senator Hannah-Beth Jackson, for those of you that don't know. We do have a gentleman from the Transportation Department from Memphis, Tennessee, that is joining us this morning. So you may not be familiar with our senator, but our Senator Hannah-Beth Jackson represents all of Santa Barbara County and the western portion of Ventura County. She chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee and the Joint Legislative Committee. on emergency management. Senator Jackson is the author of the county's strongest equal pay and is a champion for women, families, and environment. She is the author of Senate Bill 358, the California Fair Pay Act, landmark legislation that establishes the strongest equal pay law in the country. Let's give it up. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this ride this morning. Thank you. Come on up, Senator.
As a younger woman, I would have rejected that offer to assist me getting up, but age does sometimes humble you. What also humbles me is the opportunity to be representing this extraordinary community in the California State Senate. I remember this theater when it was the Plaza Theater. Many films here and some great theater, and so I'm so delighted to see that the community has kept it going, and thank you to those who are continuing its great legacy. I also want to thank you. It's not often that we elected officials can start a morning off early with many choices of delicious coffees. I noticed that was quite nice, and appreciate again the opportunity to be here. I do have to tell you that I'm unfortunately going to have to leave after my remarks. You mentioned that I chair the Senate Judiciary Committee. There are a number of ballot initiatives that are proposed for November, and if we can resolve those issues by, we have lots of time, next Thursday, they won't go on the ballot, we won't be confusing the public any further, and you won't have to watch those terrible political advertisements. So I have at least 2 or 3 of those that just got literally dropped on my desk last night that I've got to work on, but no pressure. So I did want to come, though, and talk about transportation in our community because it's so important. You know, it's one of those quality of life issues. So I want to thank Joyce Donaldson, the Carpinteria Valley Chamber, for hosting this event, as well as inviting me to participate. Transportation is one of those key elements in not only preserving and protecting our environment because of the greenhouse gas issue, and of course we've all suffered through the horrific wildfire that occurred in December, something that was absolutely unheard of in California. Not only was it a massive wildfire that started in December, our fire season supposedly ends in October, but it was the largest wildfire in the history of the state, and all of us here for 40 days that fire burned without any real recognition of where and when and if it was going to stop. And so I think we are all still kind of taking a deep breath, if we can get a deep breath, and recognizing that we've really got a responsibility to try to do something about the changing climate and the changing conditions we live in. And transportation is one of those items. We have an opportunity now to address and reduce our use of carbon emission vehicles, and also to find a way to have a better experience when we get in our cars. The other day, one of my staff told me it took them 1 hour and 45 minutes to get up here from Oxnard. I mean, you can go to LA in that period of time. Of course, I don't know why you would, but you could. And so we have to think about this also as a quality of life issue. Now, I'm originally from the East Coast. I grew up right outside of Boston, and I used to take the public transit, the MTA we called it then. It's now the MBTA. If any of you are old enough to remember the great song Charlie on the MTA. Will he ever return? No, he never returns, and his fate is still unknown. He may ride forever beneath the streets of Boston. He's the man who never returned. And that was sort of the culture I grew up in. You took public transit. It was easier. You let somebody else do the driving. It was relatively predictable and accessible. And then coming out to California, which I did 3 lifetimes ago, recognizing that we have always been an automobile-driven society, only because in the early 1900s, with the oil companies and the Firestone Tire Company, they pulled out all the tracks in Los Angeles that moved people from downtown to the beach. And now, of course, at the cost of billions of dollars, we're trying to reinstate that system. But here we are in Carpinteria, in Santa Barbara County, and in Ventura County. We have a rail line already in existence. And when I first moved here about 40 years ago, I always marveled at the fact that we had the infrastructure all ready to do a train. And for many years, my husband and I lived in Santa Barbara and had a law practice both here and in Ventura. And so driving to Ventura early in the morning, you were driving against traffic. And I watched as over the years, the traffic got worse and worse and worse coming up from Ventura to Santa Barbara. This is not unique. Most of the major cities in California have this similar problem. We haven't thought rail. And so about 20 years ago, when I was first elected to the state assembly, I was committed to seeing what we could do to get passenger rail up from LA to Santa Barbara during particularly commuter-timed traffic so we could have a better life experience. Sitting in traffic is no fun for anybody. I don't care what books on tape you're listening to or what of your favorite singers or bands and musicians you are listening to. This is not fun. And it creates amazing tension when you get to work and then tension driving home when you get home from work. And so I started working on this project 20 years ago. And what we discovered is that Union Pacific owns the rails and we have no ability, no jurisdiction over what they do on those rails. We have a few trains that we've gotten slots, they call them slots. You know, everything you mentioned, everything, it's like alphabet soup, SB CAG, and we could go on with the different names and so forth. So about 2 or 3 years ago, the opportunity arose to really start twisting some arms when I was in the Senate's Natural Resources Budget Committee. And the governor has this thing about high-speed rail. I don't mind high-speed rail. I'm just not sure why we're putting it in the middle of nowhere. But that being said, this was really important to him, and we were creating a funding mechanism as a result of this cap-and-trade system where we're trying to reduce greenhouse gases, and we're doing it in a market-based way. Anyway, that brings in a lot of money to the state, and the governor wanted it all to go to high-speed rail. And I said, no, we have other issues here. 75% of the population of California lives within an hour of the coast. Let's focus a little bit on relieving some of the traffic problems along the coast. So long and short of it is that I was able to get a commitment from the governor's office and from the California Transportation Commission, I think we have some people here, that we would do more to try to improve what they call intercity rail. And so as a result, we negotiated a deal, and I know Greg Hart's here, and Greg was very instrumental with SB CAG in getting now, we have a commuter time train that comes up from LA, from Union Station at some ungodly hour of the morning. I think it's like 4 o'clock, but I'm told that it has significant ridership. So yes, California is the home of, crazy people. But they're on that train. And the train, it comes up, it's a little bit earlier than we would like, but people are starting to ride that train, and I want to tell you all that that train is now on time. It is an on-time train. In fact, it's coming in early, and it has for the last, I think, 4 to 6 weeks. They worked out the kinks, like we always do in a new effort, and so I would encourage you, either from Carpinteria to Santa Barbara. I know Doss takes the train regularly. We want it to be reliable. It has to be affordable, and it should be comfortable. And so when I was negotiating this, I said, look, folks, I want a good cup of coffee in the morning and a little cafe car where people can get breakfast. It's a great ride. You're right on the ocean. And at night, let's put a pub in and have some locally crafted beer, which I'm told has been very successful, by the way, and give people a good experience, and they will take the train. And I would urge you all to encourage people coming up from Ventura in the morning, going home at night. We've got a last mile. They call it the last mile because the train doesn't necessarily leave you off right in front of your place of work. But we do have a number of employers here in Santa Barbara and Goleta who are creating this flexible work time. One of the conditions was the trains all have to be Wi-Fi so that people can work or read the paper or how do you read the paper online? There's a name for it. Whatever it is, most of us, I remember as a kid, people would have their, Boston Herald in the morning, and they'd be reading it on the way to work, and suddenly they're at work, boom. There's a way people can work on the train, going to work, coming home from work, and that's what this train is like. And so I hope that all of you will encourage people you know who are coming up from the south, or whether, is it from the east? One doesn't know. We are a south-facing, at any rate, they're coming up from Ventura, Camarillo, from Moore Park, wherever they're coming up and landing in Santa Barbara, Goleta, or Carpinteria to work. And what this will do is it will relieve a lot of that traffic. And it's working. We were able to get additional funds in the budget, about $130 million. We're going to create more sidings. Because it's a single track. We're working with Union Pacific. You know, they're a business. They want some kind of compensation for the use of their lines. And we will, hopefully, the goal is, by the end of this investment, with the siding, the way trains can go off to the side when a freight train comes through, and vice versa, is be able to have trains coming up from LA and Ventura County every half an hour. And I think this is going to be an enormous benefit to this community. And I don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime, but we're working in that direction. And it is my hope and expectation that we'll be able to do that. So that would be very helpful. And please get people to use the train. We noted during the disaster, we had 1,100, 1,200 people a day getting on those trains, and I was able to get them to send trains down from the Capitol Corridor. There aren't enough train sets, believe it or not, and we don't make trains in the United States anymore, so we have to buy them from Canada or from Spain or other places in Europe. It's a very complicated system, as I kept telling them. It's taken 20 years to get a train during the commuter time. We landed a man on the moon in less time than that, and 50 years ago. What is the deal? It's very complicated, but we have sort of broken that logjam, and I'm very confident going forward. But we need people to use the train, and it really is a wonderful experience. So the second part of this, of course, is our roads and our streets and our freeways are a mess. Let's face it. The potholes, the fact that we have so many bridges in our country that are endangered, that are unstable, and our roads are they're built for 80 or 100 years ago, and we need to fix them. And so here comes a bill called SB 1, otherwise known as the gas tax. Now, when the gas tax was first introduced, first of all, we haven't increased the gas tax since 1990. There's nothing you can buy or do or see that costs the same as it cost in 1990. And so we have been stuck with this gas tax. Now, mind you, the cost of gas has gone up, but that's because the oil companies are making more profit. That's because they've reduced the number of refineries, so they've got a monopoly on this. Well, the gas tax, which is what we use to do our roads and our streets, and the incredible work that Caltrans is doing now to expand the different roadways and on-ramps here in Carpinteria, as an example. It takes money to do that. And because the cost of all the materials, the cost of labor, the cost of the concrete and the asphalt continues to rise, the number of projects we've been able to do here in California has been reduced. And yet the number of the greater demand has not been reduced, is greater and greater every year. And so we passed this gas tax, and I'm going to own this. This is a tax. This is a gas tax. We charge it on every gallon of gas, and the money is supposed to go into fixing our roads and bridges and infrastructure. So that's an important element. So we passed this tax with the assistance and the support of the business community, of the Chamber of Commerce very specifically, which in my world is quite unusual. They don't usually support a lot of the things that I support. Of course, they're wrong and I'm right, but that's another story. On this one, we're all right. And why? Because there are two keys to the growing economy, to a successful economy in this country and probably worldwide. The two key things are a well-educated workforce and a solid infrastructure. in order to move those goods and services and people. And that is a key element that the business community has recognized is in danger. And so we passed this measure, and then it became a political football. Well, there's a part of this that I share the concerns of those who are opposed to it. And some people are just opposed to any tax. Everything should be free. So the key element is a lockbox on this money. If we are paying with our gas tax money to fix our roads and our infrastructure, that's exactly what it should be used for. That's the promise we make to people, and we need to keep that promise. And so we have passed legislation, and actually we passed an initiative that puts that lockbox on that money. And so it can only be used for the purpose for which that gas tax is imposed. Fixing our roads, our streets, our bridges, and creating a 21st century infrastructure for the state of California. Now, there is an initiative on the ballot to overturn that. I will tell you that $180 million of that anticipated gas tax will be coming to the communities of Santa Barbara County. The money is going to help with our highway programs, with our HOV project. It will allow us to complete a 15-mile HOV lane network from Carpinteria to Montecito. Its efforts will provide some of these multimodal options for residents and commuters in Ventura and Santa Barbara. This money is going to be used to make our lives better and to assure we can move those goods and services and keep the economy of California number 5 in the world. Think about that. California is the 5th largest economy in the world. What does that mean? That means that there are only 4 countries whose economies are bigger than California. That's the United States overall, China, Japan, and Germany. And then we are larger than any other nation's economy. And part of it is our well-educated workforce. Part of it is that we encourage visionary, innovative entrepreneurship, that we have the best trained, the best educated workforce in the country. And we have to keep our roads and infrastructure up to that 21st century level in order to stay competitive. So if this is repealed, if the gas tax is repealed, the state will lose $5 billion a year in funding. $5 billion a year that's dedicated to improving and maintaining our transportation system. And as I mentioned, right now, these funds are committed to every city and county in California that every one of us will benefit from this. Half the projects will be cut or delayed or significantly scaled back if we repeal this gas tax. So I want to urge us to support this. Again, taxes aren't popular. I think it was Learned Hand or Oliver Wendell Holmes, or one of those great folks on the Supreme Court many years ago said, taxes are the dues you pay to live in a civilized world. And was it Holmes? Thank you. Doss says it was Holmes. I agree. So the bottom line is that and I agree that the money has to go for what it's promised. And we have assured that there is a lockbox on this money. So as business people and the chambers here, I think we all recognize and understand the importance of maintaining and improving the quality of our roads and our streets. So while I'm optimistic we are on the right track, we have to continue to work to bring together the funding. We have to think a little differently. Let's go, ironically, trains are, 100 years, 150 years old. They created the state of California. It was the railroads. Now we've got a 21st century railroad system. And if any of you have ever been to Japan, have any of you been to Japan and ridden on the Shinkansen? It's a high-speed rail system. It's never had a fatality. It's been in effect for 30, 40 years. It is on time like you would not believe. You can set your clock to it. It is a smooth ride. It gets you where you need to go, and it does it at 220 miles an hour. Think about that. And I know that Hazel's here. Hazel, we need a plane up to Sacramento. I'm just going to make that pitch again. But think about the ability to get on a train traveling 220 miles an hour. You can get to San Francisco in an hour and a half or 2 hours. A nice ride where you can read, relax, sleep. It runs like one of those old Cadillacs used to ride, smooth as can be, smooth as butter, and we can do that. And we don't have to even be the first. Europe has done it. Japan, as I mentioned, has an extraordinary system. We have got to invest in our infrastructure. And so I'd like to leave you with that thought that we need to invest, but smartly. And so I hope today, as we have this discussion going forward, we think about it. I want to leave you with one last thought. On Wednesday, I chair a group, it's a round table with the University of California. You know, they're doing some of the most extraordinary research about the future. And I invited 2 speakers to come in and talk about artificial intelligence. Now, there's something to scare you. But we are creating robots that can do everything. One of the things that one of the speakers reminded us, you know, drones is an issue I'm very interested in. How do we start getting some control over these things that are flying everywhere and sometimes invading our privacy and sometimes doing extraordinary things? He looked at me and said, you know, drones are an issue. He said, but get ready for flying cars. And on that note, I will leave you to think of the future, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you so much to our senator. She actually inspired me a few years ago when you were out at a ledge breakfast and you were talking about the future of trains, and I was like, oh yeah, not in my lifetime. And then the disasters hit, and it kind of fast forwarded everything. The SB1 funding came through, so it all kind of came together. So thank you for inspiring this summit this morning. Next up, we'd like to bring up our highly esteemed Mayor Fred Shaw. He's going to give an overview on what the city's transportation issues look like, and it'll be followed by Dave Derflinger, our city manager. So welcome, Fred.
Thank you, Joyce, and thank you all for being here. And thank you, Hannah Beth. That was very enjoyable and enlightening. The first lesson I learned in city government is that nothing just happens. At the beginning of everything is a vision of what you would like your city to look like. And then the leaders need to create policies to allow for that vision. And finally, there's the time when everything just kind of comes together and we realize the results of it. Transportation is no different. Before Carpinteria could become a city, its leaders had to have a vision of what our community should look like. Key to that was planning our streets and how residents would get around. As the city moved towards the 21st century, City Council needed to plan ahead for more cars and alternative forms of transportation to mitigate the impacts on travel and the environment. Critical to this was finding a balance between broader growth in the Carpinteria region and the desire to preserve the small rural character that we are all able to enjoy. Maintaining Carpinteria's unique character as a little beach town inherently mitigates much of the urban feel that so many beach communities think about a place like Marina del Rey. That feeling that you get when you go into one of those cities. But all of this just didn't happen. It required making choices and being true to that vision. As our industrial and agricultural sectors flourished, the city had to plan for and create ways to move employees and residents throughout the city and beyond, as well as plans for how to furnish housing and transit for all income levels for those people who wanted to make Carpinteria their home. While it's not possible to control regional or statewide growth, the city has worked with the state and federal agencies to offset the transportation impacts of this growth, widening our existing freeway, new overcrossings, new on and off ramps, more bike and pedestrian paths, enhanced local transit options. They're all part of a collective vision to minimize clogged roads and ease movement throughout our city for both residents and visitors alike. In Carpinteria, the automobile is a choice rather than a necessity. Within our small town vision, The city has planned for and created walkways and bike paths to enhance the opportunity to enjoy our community. You can browse through our local downtown, dine, or lie on the beach, all just a short walk or a bike ride away. Our seaside shuttle can take you shopping in our little downtown or drop you off by the library. Between the train, our various bus services, and the newly widened freeway, regional options to get to other nearby destinations are easy to come by. And all of what we have now, or will see in the near future, is the product of a vision of enacting policies to prepare for the opportunity to attain, and as the financing became available at the state and federal level, the commitment to fulfill that vision. At the same time, it's not all roses and rainbows. We have to recognize that there are issues and challenges for the city. While all of our local infrastructure work goes on, there's certainly impacts to our local streets from detoured regional traffic, as I'm sure we've all noticed. Our parking lots and in-town travel feels daily pressure of literally millions of visitors who want to briefly enjoy what we have to offer. While we're comfortable here in our small family-friendly downtown, it also means that sometimes we might even need to leave it to access big box stores and other resources not available here. Personally, I think it's a small price to pay for living in Carpinteria. There is the ever-present potential for isolation during disasters, something that's happened at least twice in the last decade. And of course, we have the elephant in the room. To keep our streets and roadways properly maintained costs a great deal of money, and the city will need to find the funding in order to facilitate this maintenance and other necessary capital projects. We will persevere. With that, I'll turn it over to our city manager, who will elaborate on the specifics of our programs going forward. Dave?
Thanks, Fred. Thanks for that introduction. Appreciate it. Now, we had some pictures to go on in the background, but the clicker wouldn't work from down here, so I'll ask Bob to click through a few. Thanks, Bob. Just go ahead and keep going. This was our vision statement that the mayor was referring to that has some integral aspects related to transportation. We'll go ahead and keep moving. And, yeah. Keep on clicking here until you get to the start of my part. And I'll tell you when to stop, Bob. Yeah. Yeah, we all remember that. All right. Okay, go ahead and stop there, Bob. Thank you. Good morning. And again, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Senator Jackson. We are in a unique period in our history in Carpinteria with major capital projects like the freeway going on. And as was mentioned, we do a lot of planning at the city level. I come from a planning background. We have a general plan, which is our Bible for policy, that looks at all kinds of different elements of the community and its future, and transportation, circulation, how we get around is a major part of that, along with other elements like land use, where we build things and how we build things. We do strategic planning every year where we talk about how are we going to implement these things. We do this decade after decade and year after year, and it's exciting to see real progress being made in a major way, like the freeway project. And the freeway project also brings opportunities, of course, to correct things that maybe didn't turn out so well in the past, right? The freeway sliced through the middle of town, left things unfinished, left things in terms of getting around by pedestrian and by walking and by bicycle a little more difficult, if not unsafe. And there's opportunities to correct those sins here, and we're taking advantage of that. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about regional cooperation on getting major things done like the freeway, things that a city alone perhaps can't do, and also some of the things that we do incrementally and on a day-to-day basis, big and small, to improve transportation getting around in Carpinteria. So transportation, as the mayor mentioned, is a regional issue, connected at the hip with housing and employment, and regional strategies and cooperation are required in order to see positive results over time. As a small city government, Carpinteria cannot alone expect to effectively address issues around transportation, so we work cooperatively. To this end, the city participates in various regional efforts in order to influence transportation and housing outcomes consistent with the city's vision and goals. Along with other cities in the county, Carpinteria is a member, you've heard this, the Santa Barbara County Association of Government. This is a council of governments, like in many regions in California. And in California, associations of governments like RSBCAG that does such good work, you're going to be hearing from Margie and others in a few minutes, when working effectively with its member cities and counties, play a very important role in how well our communities function. Two areas, transportation and transportation planning, funding for transportation projects, as well as housing, are areas that our Santa Barbara County Association of Government works with its cities on, does a great job. On the regional housing and needs planning, as I mentioned, housing is a critical part of transportation. Access to, location, and type of housing affects the transportation needs of a region. The city works with SBCAG to understand the amount of housing needed for households of varying incomes. Once that's known, the city evaluates its land use and zoning policies to ensure that there are opportunities for building the type of housing needed in the right locations. Over the years, this has led to an improved understanding of our housing needs, identifying where housing can go and what type it ought to be, and then working with groups like People's Self-Help Housing, Habitat for Humanity, and their expertise in funding getting these types of projects built, to get a fairly significant amount of housing that's available for workers built in the Carpinteria community. And of course, what this does is it allows for shorter commutes or no commutes for employees in Carpinteria, which is critical to reducing congestion on the freeway and congestion on local streets. On the regional transportation and planning project side, the city cooperates on planning. The best example, of course, is the freeway project. This was a decades-long project. The city had some needs to start with around the freeway, things like extending Via Real and other improvements around the freeway project. The widening and the interchange improvements were begun before I started here in 1999 in terms of planning and designing that. It took years and years of both planning work and aligning the funding to get the interchange project first funded and designed and permitted, and then the freeway project on its heels. So it's really, it's a long term, and it was a real miraculous process that led to that. So we work cooperatively with Santa Barbara County Association of Government on the planning and the funding side. We work cooperatively with the state and Caltrans on the permitting side. We have the authority to issue local coastal permits here. And so there was really a team of people and decision makers that worked for years on making that happen. And it's happening now to the benefit of the Carpinteria community. It will result in some real improvements, not only in moving traffic through Carpinteria as a regional improvement, but also, as I indicated, result in improvements in the Carpinteria circulation system. Via Real, out by Rancho Granada Mobile Home Park, will be extended over the creek. You see that bridge is completed and tie into Casitas Pass Road, creating a significant circulation improvement. Both the bridges, Casitas Pass and Linden, will include sidewalks now on both sides, bicycle lanes, improvements that will make it much more safe and convenient for pedestrians getting around Carpinteria. Of course, the improved and widened bridges will be safer and easier to move around for everybody, including, importantly, emergency access vehicles. I want to talk a little bit about transit too. You're going to be hearing from Jerry Estrada in a few minutes from the Santa Barbara MTD. They do great work and they provide service here in Carpinteria, including regional bus service with line 20 and 21X, and also a local shuttle service. We have a long-standing plan to expand shuttle service in Carpinteria and strive to do that, and are working with MTD about that, especially on the east-west end of the city. Our local shuttle does a real good job of serving the central part of the city, the downtown and our residential neighborhoods. But the east-west area, since we're laid out in a long way east-west along the corridor, it's difficult to get service out into those areas. The freeway project with making the connection, as I mentioned, at Villa Real, and other improvements with a new shuttle bus that has greater speed and power to get up hills, gives us an opportunity to relook at this issue and possibly expand bus service east and west. That's an important aspect of the freeway project and the progress MTD has made on their shuttle service, and we look to take advantage of that here in the future. We also have partnerships. The paratransit service that MTD has a partnership with EasyLift provides service here in Carpinteria. We also have a wonderful dial-a-ride service called Help that the city supports and provides wonderful service around Carpinteria, lift service for folks needing to get around. And I should also mention you're going to be hearing from Kent Epperson of Traffic Solutions. They do a great job of working with the business community in Carpinteria and throughout the region, and helping them with their commuting needs and setting up plans to reduce commuting and help employees get to and from work. Finally, I want to mention train service. Senator Jackson mentioned the train service. Exciting project. We've just heard that we've got grant funding for expanding the train platform here in Carpinteria off of Linden. It'll double the platform, put another platform on the other side, double the tracking through here, allowing trains to pass. Commuter trains in particular, the Amtrak trains to pass in Carpinteria. And it also have, again, other related benefits to Carpinteria, not only for using the train service, but also an undercrossing of the railroad and a trail connection. As it is now, the way the train tracks are set up, they create a lot of barriers to moving people, cars, and pedestrians back and forth in the community. We have a master plan for working around the corridor and creating various crossings through the city. This project down at the railroad track will create an opportunity to create one of those links, an undercrossing of the railroad, a link over between the beach neighborhood and Aliso School on 7th Street, which again help people get around more safely, including kids. So those are some examples of kind of regional cooperation work that results in both improvements in moving people through the region, but also related improvements specifically in Carpinteria that align with our goals and vision for community circulation. But we also, as I mentioned, do local work in particular, kind of on a daily basis, and plan it with our own capital funds and our own work with the City Council and the community. And that begins with, as I mentioned, I have a planning background, so I tend to see things from a perspective of starting with land use planning, because it's the foundation for good things to happen. And responsible, informed land use planning and zoning, of course, has an effect on transportation needs and efficiency. And Carpinteria has a history of that responsible land use planning, not only in the size of the community, but also in the balance of land uses, right? We don't want to have a bedroom community where everyone has to commute out. We don't want to have an area that's all jobs and high-intensity jobs where everybody has to commute in, and there's not adequate or the type of housing to support that. Carpinteria is in pretty good balance. Our zoning and land use over the years and decisions made about the type of intensity of use over time have supported that responsibility and not exacerbating the transportation and commuting issues in the region. I should also mention the way that development occurs in Carpinteria can have an influence on commuting need and transportation needs. Carpinteria was one of the early adopters of mixed-use zoning and has done quite a bit of infill work. So you see that rather than growing in an outward way, the city is looking inward and improving, especially focusing development and businesses in our existing commercial cores, the downtown area and the shopping centers versus growing outward. Also an important aspect of making sure that we're growing in a responsible way. Turning to some of our infrastructure needs and the way we have planned and grown our infrastructures, there's been a real movement over the last couple of decades in really what we see as completing our streets, and there's a complete streets kind of a concept. It's evolving our street system in order to be more balanced between not just serving cars, but also serving pedestrians and bicycles. Ed France is going to follow me, and he's going to talk about some of those projects in more detail. But you've seen these projects everywhere from our downtown. Downtown's probably the most obvious one. Where we've widened sidewalks and made it easier for pedestrians to get around. They feel safer, and that supports the local business economy. It supports people getting around. We made lots and lots of those projects. We take them on every year to make little incremental improvements to our system to make it easier for bikes, people to get around by bikes on trails and that sort of thing. I want to talk about some capital projects here, but before I do that, I want to talk about maintenance of our infrastructure. Transportation requires a system of streets that is maintained well, and that's a challenge. As the Senator mentioned, there's some funding out there at the state level that will help. There's some local funding that will help. But we've identified about $1.5 million shortfall in revenue locally here going forward on an annual basis in order to take care of street and right-of-way maintenance and other capital project needs that we've identified over a 5-year period. That's a significant shortfall, and it's a real challenge to making sure that people can get around Carpinteria again in a safe and efficient way. Things as simple as paving the street, fixing sidewalks that are uplifted become a challenge on an annual basis. So I want to talk in wrapping up about a few capital projects. We fund capital projects largely through grants that come through Santa Barbara County Association of Governments and the Measure A program. In particular, connected with the freeway project was the Coastal Vista Trail in Carpinteria. That included improvements at both the east and west ends. So if you know in Carpinteria, we have a wonderful trail that spans along the coast through the bluffs, and we're looking to make connections from the bluff top down to Rincon County Park on the east, and on the west between Carpinteria Avenue and Santa Claus Lane. We now have the funding and the designs in the works to make that happen. It's exciting connections that will make it easier to get around both by walking and by bike. We do a lot of work in making connections and missing links and sidewalks. We call them infill projects. We've done those around the Carpinteria main school, filling in sidewalks. We have a sidewalk project that's now in the planning stages between Dump Road and City Hall to finish that where there's a break in the sidewalk. And I mentioned railroad undercrossings. We have a plan to build several railroad undercrossings that will make it easier to get from the inland areas along the coast where people want to be. We also spend time and money on replacing old stuff. So our infrastructure was built back in the 50s and 60s, a little bit in the 70s, a large majority of it built at that time when the city was growing and subdividing. That stuff is now old and needs to be replaced. The big projects in the past included things like the 8th Street footbridge that now is a brand new. We can advance some of the slides, Bob. Appreciate that. So here's some of the trail connection examples, and keep rolling through them, Bob. This was a great project that the state park did that added to the Coastal Vista Trail connecting. We'll keep moving along. Here's the concept of the Rincon Trail connection from the bluff top down into the state county park. Another angle looking at that trail alignment of the Rincon Trail connection, and artist rendering of that. This is Santa Claus Lane where the trail will connect to the west. Here's the 8th Street Bridge, the beautiful span over the Carpinteria Creek. And then I mentioned the railroad undercrossing. So these are some of the exciting projects going on that we take on kind of on an annual basis to try to improve circulation around Carpinteria. Now I'll turn it over to Ed France from the Santa Barbara Bicycle Coalition.
Dave, thank you so much. Thank you, Carpinterians. It is an honor to be here representing the 1,400 members of the Santa Barbara Bicycle Coalition to basically express how much a fan I am of what you all have envisioned and have planned and have prepared, because Carpinteria is about to knock it out of the park. So I want to talk about a couple of projects that are really significant that Dave highlighted just briefly. And but first, Bob, next slide. So going to the Rincon Trail, who here has heard of the California Coastal Trail? All right, this is significant. This is envisioned since the 70s as from Oregon to Mexico, a non-motorized pathway to connect our coastline, 10,000 miles, or something like that. I'm sorry, I'm phasing, but basically, the problem is only half of it has been built. And who here has ridden down to Ventura, right? Who here did it before the Rincon Muscle Shoals or Ralph Fertig Memorial Trail, right? The brave amongst you. Who here has ridden afterwards on that beautiful oceanside trail? The difference is so significant. It has unified Ventura and Santa Barbara counties for people passing through the California Coastal Route in a way that is transformational in just the experience and also the attractiveness, the draw of these routes for people, whether they're Carpinterians or Santa Barbarans who want to bike with their families on the weekend, or whether they're visitors who want to bike some of the most beautiful areas in the state. So the Queen of the Coast, as Rincon is often referred to, the Rincon Trail is going to connect that so that you don't have to go through Bates Road. I'm going to talk about the Rincon Trail, I'm going to talk about Santa Claus Lane, and I'm going to talk about Carpinteria Creek undercrossing. What's so beautiful about this is that you don't have to ride on the freeway anymore, but you kind of do, because you have to kind of go down the on-ramp to get to Rincon, or you have to go over 150 and down Bates. All of those are a little bit tough. I actually have a friend who lives in Rincon, and she wanted to bike into town, and so she biked up the freeway on-ramp and got stopped by CHP. And she asked them, well, what do you think I should do that's better? Let's, Bob, go to the next slide and show a video that's going to talk about this project.
Rincon Point is an extraordinary place nestled between the Los Padres National Forest and the Santa Barbara Channel National Marine Sanctuary. This beautiful stretch of California coast is a world-class surfing destination, and the nearby islands are a national park. Transportation projects in this location have always been an engineering challenge. In the late 1800s, horse-drawn vehicles could only travel at low tide between the cities of Ventura and Santa Barbara. In 1910, a modern road, which included a 7,000-foot-long elevated wooden causeway, was built to accommodate automobiles. A narrow paved road replaced this highway in 1925. In the late 1960s, the highway and the railroad were rerouted through the mountain. This modern engineering feat significantly improved rail, automotive, and truck travel, but did not provide a safe or viable alternative for bicyclists and pedestrians, who are some of the 25,000 commuters who currently pass through each day. The trail begins at Rincon Park and continues north for 3/4 of a mile, connecting to Carpinteria Avenue. The Rincon Multi-Use Trail finally addresses these previous design omissions by providing safe coastal access to everyone. The trail, made of environmentally sensitive permeable concrete, features a bridge that safely carries bicyclists and pedestrians over the railroad tracks. The Rincon Multi-Use Trail will provide a recreational experience with spectacular views of the Santa Barbara Channel, the offshore islands, migrating whales, and resident bottlenose dolphin. Bicycle commuters will finally have a safe and convenient route, reducing highway traffic congestion and the dangerous illicit use of the railroad tracks as a makeshift path. The beautiful Rincon Multi-Use Trail will be designed in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act and accessible to people of all abilities. Finally, the project will fill in a missing link of the Juan Bautista de Anza National Historic Trail and the California Coastal Trail. It's time to support this important public project and provide safe access to this special stretch of the California coast.
Whoa, thank you, Carpinteria and SB CAG. This project is funded and queued up for, Sarkis, were you saying 1920, fiscal year 1920? That's about as fast as you could imagine a project like this happening. So that's just 3/4 of a mile, but it's such a significant project because it's a gap in the network that is going from a pretty rough connection to being literally separated by a hillside from the freeway and getting to just have that unobstructed view of the ocean. It's really going to be breathtaking. On the other side of town, there's the Santa Claus Lane. Who here has recently been out to the beach? Here we are, solstice weekend, out Santa Claus Lane. Who's biked or walked out there? Right? This is your route. If you're going around, you have to go up and over and back around through Villa Real to bike or walk to the beach. And as we know, the county is pursuing the Santa Claus Lane streetscape project, which is going to add parking. But one of the challenges, I think, why parking is so impacted there on a nice beach day is it is kind of tough to get to. So this route here is actually over 2 miles. If you go to the next slide, Bob, that connection is less than a mile through what will be a multi-use path. So if you're like me and you've had a great day on Santa Claus Lane, maybe you had a meal at the Padaro Beach Grill, you're like, oh, I could go for a beer out at Brew Lab right now. You could just cruise through a nice multi-use path. You could walk this path relatively easily and certainly bike through. That is going to be such an amenity for locals. I think it's going to be such an enhancement for Santa Claus Lane, both for the beach and for the commercial corridor there, and for the coastal trail. Who's biked down the coastal trail, say from Santa Barbara, Goleta, down through Ventura or further? Right? The first time that you did it, did you ever get lost? Right? It's confusing. And the section on Villa Real, it's touch and go. I mean, even Jerry Dahill, one of our teachers at Rincon High, was hit from behind and nearly killed on Villa Real just this past year. It's not where we want to route our kids, our families, or our visitors. And with this project, you'll be able to ride through the ocean on the ocean side, the whole way through. Next slide, Bob. So this little circuitous kick through to Villa Real, and then going through the gas stations by Santa Monica Road, and then crossing over, and literally having no bike lane and having to cross left on the bridge over to get to Carpinteria Ave. That type of bike navigation is something that our competitive cyclists can do, but that's not something that we should expect of everyone. And it's no longer going to be a necessity if SB1 funding can continue and the Santa Claus Lane path can be built. And it's going to be so nice to be able to route through Padaro, through Santa Claus Lane, through Carpinteria Ave, the whole way through. And those are important for the California Coastal Trail and for people visiting through Carpinteria, because it's not going to be just a pass-through anymore. It's going to be so much more of a destination. Next slide, Bob. These projects, as part of SB1, as part of the 101 HOV lanes, are, such as Dave was mentioning, sort of a complete streets view. This is improving the corridor for everyone. Next slide. And when we think about visitors, Carpinteria has, Fred, you mentioned 1 million visitors a year. That can be a parking impact. One of the things that people are realizing is that bicycle tourism is actually a significant part of our regional tourism driver. And I'd like to point out Frank Peters, our board member, and the Cycle California Coast maestro. Please go to this website and look at Carpinteria and our region through a new lens because there are so many amazing rides that people worldwide are coming to do. Whether it's Gubernador Loop, whether it's Gibraltar or Figueroa Mountain, or just biking down our coast with their families. We really are a worldwide cycling destination, and the projects that are being queued up are going to take Carpinteria to the center of that. Next slide. But it's not just about people visiting by bike. It's not just about the roadies, the recreational competitive cyclists. It's about regular Carpinterians wanting to cruise through town or get to work. It's interesting. We all know that there's so much bicycling out at UCSB and in Isla Vista. It's like our little Copenhagen. But when you look at the census tracts, anybody can do this, go to Census Explorer and look at transportation, and you actually see that the next highest density of cyclists is actually in a census tract here in Carpinteria. And it actually doesn't surprise me. I mean, Carpinteria is such a bikeable community. It's so much fun to be downtown and see families cruising by on cruisers and flip-flops. But what is significant about the census tract, Bob, next slide, is that it's actually sort of divided by Carpinteria Creek. So, Bob, go back one. So here, there's north of the freeway, there's south of the freeway, and then there's Carpinteria Creek, kind of dividing 3 census tracts. And the Carpinteria Creek, as Dave highlighted, is finally, it had an undercrossing this whole time. That actually is pretty well used, especially by folks in the mobile home park. That's right on the side there. But if you lived on the northwest portion, it really did not connect at all because of Via Real not connecting. Next slide. But this pathway and the Via Real connection, I think fundamentally is going to make Carpinteria for residents north side of the freeway a safe connection because this only non-freeway on-ramp or off-ramp aligned crossing is going to be connected for the entire community. And that was a significant part that was written into the plan for the 101 HOV project. And actually, who's biked through Via Real already? It's amazing. You can finally connect it. And I can't wait to get under Carpinteria Creek, which is set for next year. Bob? So what I think is going to happen is that as you can connect now along Via Real and then under Carpinteria Creek, the ability to easily, safely, comfortably ride through Carpinteria by bike is going to be greatly enhanced for all 3 census tracts, and getting from downtown Carp to where you live is going to be so much easier. And I think that's going to be a feather in the cap of this community. And as there continue to be mobility changes in the future, things like scooters and bike share, I think it'll only get easier still. Next slide. They call Goleta the good land. I think Carpinteria is the great land. And with everything that's happening along the Carpinteria Bluffs and these significant projects on either side of Carpinteria from Santa Claus Lane to Rincon, I think that more and more families here and families throughout our area are going to flock to the Carpinteria Bluffs to enjoy the world's safest beach and soon the world's safest bike routes. Thank you so much. All right. So from very local to beyond regional, I'd like to invite Hazel Johns from the Santa Barbara Airport.
Okay, there's. Good morning, and thank you for having me. It was really a pleasure when Joyce called and said, Hazel, would you like to participate in the transportation summit? And I said, well, of course, because air travel is certainly important for the community and for CARP too. Oh, thank you. Bob? As you know, the Santa Barbara Airport is owned and operated by the city of Santa Barbara, but it isn't just for Santa Barbara, it's for the region. We built the new terminal back in we started in 1987, but we actually built it in 2011 and opened. And it was constructed to handle up to 1 million passengers. And it can do that with our effort to generate additional airline service. But it is a regional asset and an economic engine. We had a UCSB do an economic impact study for the airport, and it indicated that we had $205 million annually in economic impact for the region. Bob? The area that the airport serves generally goes to the North County, some into San Luis Obispo, but it also goes down to the grade in Ventura County. So it really is a regional facility. And having good service on 101, that connectivity is really critical for passengers traveling to the airport. Bob? We also did a study of our passengers to find out what their needs are and also what type of passengers we have. And as you can tell in this study that was done at the terminal, our passengers are mature, well-educated, financially established, and also have high-value travel. 60% or more of our travelers are for business, and 28% is for leisure. So we're really addressing the business side, and we want to look more for leisure to build that up as well. We also work very closely with Visit Santa Barbara, and Kathy's probably has updated this survey since this slide was prepared. But as you can see, tourism for the region is very important and generates about $1.9 billion a year in a variety of service and for adventure companies, for hotels, for restaurants. Bob? This slide's kind of, it tells a story. Because when we built the terminal, before we built the terminal, we had the highest number of passengers traveling through Santa Barbara's airport. But then oil prices started to rise and airlines started to consolidate. And as that happened, then our passengers decreased. And for about a 10-year period, we lost about 27% of the passengers. It wasn't that we didn't have the market, but rather we didn't have the seats on the airplanes to actually get the folks out of our region. So in 2016, we started, well, not in 16, but for years we've started working with the airlines to generate more service. And we finally started turning that around in 2016. I'd like to share a little bit about the airline industry and what those changes really meant to our area. Bob? One more. In 2000, and even before 2000, there were numerous airlines. Keep in mind there's about 400 airports nationally that are seeking airline service. So you have a limited number of airlines, and in 2000 we had, these are just an example of the airlines that were providing service domestically and internationally and some in Santa Barbara. Bob? Then the consolidation started taking place. American consolidated, Delta consolidated with Northwest, and when that happened, we lost Delta service in Santa Barbara, not once again because they consolidated, took the aircraft and the crew from Santa Barbara and put it on the East Coast. Bob? So now, after 10 years of consolidation, we have basically 3 major domestic airlines, American, Delta, and United. We have two of those airlines, American and United at Santa Barbara. You have hybrid airlines, Southwest and Alaska. They're not really high-end and they're not really low-cost, but they are good, solid airlines, and we have Alaska Airlines flying to Seattle and Portland. And then you have the low-cost and then the low cost. And when I mention low cost, it's generally you buy a ticket if you want to walk on the plane. If you want to carry your purse on the plane, that's an additional cost. If you want to put the luggage in the overhead, that's more money. So keep that in mind when you book. It looks cheap at $9 a seat, but it's really not going to be that cheap once you get on. So our air service strategy, Bob. One more. Thank you. So we look at the nation and where do our passengers want to travel. And we design a strategy as best we can based on our facility and the market, because without a market, an airline's not going to fly into Santa Barbara. So we look at what our passengers are doing, and in this slide you can tell the cities that are identified in blue, we have service. Cities in yellow are top markets for our region where we do not have service, but we're working on it. Within the state, as Hannah Beth said, she made a personal visit to my office to talk about Sacramento. Before Hannah Beth, Doss made a personal visit to my office to talk about Sacramento. I don't know anyone in government who hasn't made an appointment, just so that I know there's a real need for Sacramento service, which I do understand. But the other areas that we've had and don't have now, Oakland would be a great destination to provide competition to United for San Francisco. It also stays open more than San Francisco does. If it sprinkles in San Francisco, they go down to one main runway and everything backs up from there. Also, San Diego was one, in San Jose. Those are the areas that we look for within the state of California where we don't have service now. But we do establish goals every year for our air service strategy. Bob, one more. Thank you. So first, our goal is to maintain what we have, which is not always easy, but we do that by talking with the airlines on a continuous basis, almost daily, if not weekly. And then we also look at the additional hub connectivity that we need, the international, as we did when we wanted Dallas back, and we've also looked at other mid-continent hubs to see if we can have an airline serve that area. And as I said, the in-state cities are critical, but it's difficult to find an airline that actually flies within the state of California. Southwest does that out of Burbank, and we certainly have been pursuing Southwest to accommodate Santa Barbara as well. Next slide, Bob. And the way in which we communicate with the airlines, not just by picking up the phone and calling, which we do that as well, but there are 2 conferences annually that we attend with our airline consultant, with a route and a presentation to talk about the community, the business, the educational facilities that are available, and the tourism in Santa Barbara. And it's called speed dating, pretty much. We have 20 minutes to sit at a table and make a presentation to convince them to listen to us and to come visit Santa Barbara, or at least ask for additional information. But we're one of 400 airports that are sitting at that table doing the rotation with 3 airlines or 4 airlines. The other things that we do is to go to the headquarters. And in the past couple of years, I've gone to visit with Delta. There's a real need for Salt Lake City service to come back to Santa Barbara. And so we've gone to Delta in Atlanta, United in Chicago, American in Dallas, and we've also gone to see Southwest Airlines. We want to make sure that our service with United and American is living up to their expectations, but we also want to generate additional interest in Southwest and Delta. Next slide. And just recently in June, 4th and 5th, our staff attended, along with Kathy Jadanga Dykes, with Visit Santa Barbara. She is a huge partner and supports the airport in every opportunity that we have to sit down and actually meet. And I think they had 10 meetings this year with a variety of airlines, some of which are really small. And most airlines operate on the East Coast. California doesn't, even though we might be the 5th largest economy on the coast, we don't have the same type of service that they do on the East Coast, just because of the population. Next slide. But as a result of some of our services, we will be adding service this August. Sun Country called and said that they'd like to start service to Minneapolis-St. Paul. That's their headquarters, their hub. And we said, okay. Then Frontier, who served Santa Barbara before and left with a merger, and then is coming back, and they're going to fly to Denver 3 times a week, which is probably a good thing. They are a low-cost carrier. Now, remember, you're going to have to pay a little piece by piece to get on. But that service will also provide additional seats to Denver with connectivity and provide a little competition to United. United is also adding frequency to Denver. They started with 2 flights, they've added 3, and now they're up to 4. And they will be adding a 5th flight later this summer. So once we have Sun Country and Frontier back, we'll have 7 nonstop destinations from Santa Barbara Airport. So please, if you are traveling, think about Santa Barbara first. There is a misnomer that it's too expensive to fly out of Santa Barbara, but when you consider all of the travel needs, it's really not that expensive. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to introduce Jerry Estrada, the GM from MTD. And watch your step, Jerry.
Hey, good morning. It's a real honor to be here today. This is, I think as many of you know, my hometown, Carpinteria, born and raised, and really proud and feel blessed to be able to serve the community I grew up in through public transit. So I'm going to start my presentation with a video that kind of highlights some of the things we like to share with you today. Bob? Thank you. Next slide, Bob. I'd like to recognize Hillary Blackerby, our Community Relations Manager, and Tony Mendibla as one of our drivers and supervisors for putting that together. It's a talented group. And I really wanted to, I think it's important when you start an update like this to highlight your employees. And that's what I feel strongly about here at MTD. We have over 220 employees. Many of them are your neighbors, live here in Carpinteria, Santa Barbara. I think they do a great job. They're committed to the community, and that was never more evident than when the natural disasters hit, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. Next slide. Now, Santa Barbara, MTD, you've heard a lot about bikes. I think we do, the Bicycle Coalition and the City of Carpinteria doing a fantastic job in Carpinteria. There's, a great system in place. All the other agencies you heard about, the airport, but you also have a very successful public transit system as well. In California, there are 36 essentially urbanized areas that's just under 200,000 in the state of California. Of those, 6 of those urbanized areas meet the Federal Transit Administration's essentially performance indicators to be considered transit-intensive communities. Santa Barbara is one of those. We have well over 6 million passenger trips a year in Santa Barbara. MTD on a per capita basis, Santa Barbara ranks second in the state for ridership. So you have a very successful public transit system in Santa Barbara, and it's something we should all be very proud of. Next slide. Countywide as well, when you look at all the public transit service, and that includes the 88 paratransit services, the regional services coming in from Ventura, Lompoc, Santa Maria, Santa Barbara MTD provides over 80% of the public transit trips, and that's something, again, that we're very proud of. When you look at Santa Barbara, most of that ridership is the students. UCSB City College account for about 30% of our total ridership. But even with that, that's still something that we can be proud of, and I get calls from many general managers around the state that are asking, are those numbers real sometimes? And I say, yes, they are. Next slide. Again, this is something I think we all dealt with during the Thomas Fire and the debris flow. MTD, like many of our peers, had to respond. And for Carpinteria, we were coordinating with the city of Carpinteria. We had a bus or two staged, ready to help with evacuations through the fire, as well even after the debris flow. The day of the debris flow, I think a lot of people might not know that MTD provided 4 40-foot buses for evacuations from Montecito for survivors, essentially the larger transport vehicles as they were pulling people out, animals as well, pets. They were dropping them at the Vaughn's parking lot in Montecito. Our buses were taking them to the shelters in City College. That went on all day into the evening when the Romero Canyon survivors were lifted to the airport. MTD's buses were there to take people to the shelter. That went on for a number of days beyond that as well. We also partnered with the Carpinteria High School buses, transit system, as well as Ventura County Transportation Commission and SBCAG to provide special service the following week to get teachers through with a CHP escort through the 101 so to make sure schools could continue operating. And we also provided Thank you, Dosh. You're correct. Emergency personnel as well. And we also provided emergency first last mile to the train stations in Santa Barbara and Goleta because of the overflows that were occurring. And that's what we should be doing. We are public servants. We work for you. We have emergency reserves, and in that situation, we're going to do what we need to do. I was never prouder of our employees for the way they responded. People stepped up and did what was needed. Next slide, Bob. Now, what are we doing to move forward? Modernizing public transit here in Santa Barbara. A couple of projects that we are well into, some of them are completed. The first of which, and I'm really pleased with, is our global positioning real-time information for passengers. We have thousands of downloads now for a lot of our riders so that you can see exactly where the bus is. You can see estimated time of arrival of the vehicle. You can set your favorite bus stop, your favorite route, times of the day so that you get a text alert when the bus is nearly at the stop. So it's not just based on the schedule, it's based on real-time information. We're really pleased and we've gotten some pretty good responses about how that's rolled out. Likewise, we are working currently with City College and UCSB. We are testing smart card technology. Essentially, it's proximity technology. So the student ID cards work on our buses. So somebody can just walk up with their student ID, City College, UCSB, tap it. That's going pretty well this summer. We're hoping that we'll be able to fully roll it out by the fall, but the technology is working pretty well. That'll lead us into further enhancements in the way people can pay to get on the bus, perhaps mobile pay, that sort of thing. You can use your phone. That's what we're looking forward to. So this is the first step in that direction. Next slide. And one of the other parts, or one of the other advancements that came as a result of that project is we put security cameras inside all of our buses and out. And that's been very helpful to us. We have a fleet of 112 buses at MTD, that includes the electric shuttles. And what you see there is actually a trip, that's a Carpinteria Line 20 coming from Santa Barbara. And it's really been helpful because I think people now know that there's cameras there. For us, one of the issues as a public agency is liability, trip and fall, accidents. With this technology, it's really been helpful to us, and that benefits the taxpayer because we're able to see exactly what happened when we get claims, and we're really pleased with that. Thank you, Bob. That was the next slide. One of the things looking forward, though, as you see, what we've done is try to take technology that exists today and advance what we're doing. But we've also been pioneers at MTD, and that's been a partnership with the city of Santa Barbara since 1991 and the city of Carpinteria since I think it was 2002. And that's our electric vehicle fleet. That's the Seaside Shuttle. For many, many years, our region, Santa Barbara, had the largest fleet of electric vehicles in North America. It was only 20, but we were the only ones doing it. And it was because of the help of the Carpinteria, Santa Barbara, that we were able to do that. Now we're transitioning. As the technology is improved and modern electric buses are starting to come online, we are making that transition. Right now we have 11 of the 14 smaller shuttles, electrics, that we've ordered, and we're operating them in Santa Barbara. Now the manufacturer is having some challenges to deliver the entire order. That's nothing that we're not inexperienced with that. For example, I've been with the district 29 years. I was there when they rolled out the first shuttles. We went through 3 different manufacturers to get the first shuttles built. So this isn't something new. When you're doing new technology and you're being a pioneer, it's going to take time and perseverance. We're committed, and we're moving forward in that direction. Next slide. Now, in order to do this, I think a lot of business owners know, and you've heard it before, it takes infrastructure. You've got to have the infrastructure to support these systems. So with a fleet of 112 buses, that's really the picture on the bottom. That's our current facility over on Olive Street in Haley and Santa Barbara. We're pretty much at capacity at that point, but we were very fortunate. When this facility was opened in 2001, it was planned for electric vehicles. So with the help of the federal government, received many grants, and we were able to build it out to the point that we could probably handle as many as 30 electric vehicles on that site of the smaller size 30-footers, but maybe only about 4 to 6 of the 40-footers. And that's really something that's coming, is replacing the diesel buses with electric vehicles is something I see. It's going to happen. We're committed to that, but it's going to require working with Southern California Edison, and we are, to upgrade these facilities so that they can handle the demand that it's going to take to do that. The picture up above is our old facility in Goleta that we've held on to. Our board of directors made the decision over 10 years ago to not sell that, instead lease it, because we anticipated growth out at UCSB in Goleta, and that's what's happened. So as we reach capacity and that growth has taken place, especially at UCSB, we intend to take that property back in the next year. We are partnering with SB CAG. They were successful in getting some state grant money. We're going to start putting it back into this Goleta facility so that we can reopen that, upgrade it, and do the proper expansion. So there was some good planning in that process. Next slide. This particular property here is about 18 acres. It's out on the corner of Kyrie San Antonio off Turnpike. MTD owns this land. We have for a number of years. Originally, we intended to consolidate our facilities there. Unfortunately, that didn't work out, but we did work with the county of Santa Barbara, and we worked with local community, residents that live in the area, and together they came up with the Eastern Goleta Valley Community Plan. That plan is going to pave the way for housing on this site. MTD has been a part of that. We're working on that process. And for me, it's something I'm very proud of because as general manager, before that, I was chief financial officer of the district. And I think it's important when you run a special district on behalf of the taxpayers that you try to be efficient. And you look at your balance sheet and you ask yourself, like any business owner would, do we have underutilized assets? What can we do to make this more useful? This is something that I think is going to be great for the South Coast. It's going to result in additional housing and revenue for the district long-term that can help reduce the burden on the taxpayer. And that's something we take a lot of pride in at MTD, is managing our finances. We haven't had a general fare increase since 2009. We are getting to that point, but we're probably going to need another one soon. But something that's worked out pretty well. How do we pay for all of this? Now for us, the capital funding is taken to replace buses, put in these systems, et cetera. A lot of it over the past 10 or 11 years been paid for with Proposition 1B transportation funds. Those came along during the Schwarzenegger administration. Santa Barbara, here, we received nearly $17 million in the last 10, 11 years for those capital expenditures. That averages out about $1.5 million per year. Now those funds are nearly exhausted and they're gone. So as someone who handles a budget like that, I'm saying, what are we going to replace it with? Well, along came SB1, the gas tax funds, which we can use for capital if we get our normal share of the countywide funding. We estimate that's about $1.2 million a year to MTD, which will help offset the loss of the Proposition 1B funds that are exhausted. Next slide. We are also making a number of improvements at our transit center in downtown Santa Barbara. We're waiting for permits. We're looking forward to that, something that's overdue. The facility has been there for a long time. Looking forward to making those upgrades. Next slide. And this is my last slide, Carpinteria in particular. With a lot of the projects that are going on, we recognize that circulation is going to change. And as City Administrator Derflinger mentioned, we're looking forward to sitting down with the city and having discussions about how perhaps there can be expanded shuttle service. That's something we love to hear. You know, people want more public transit, and we want to be there to provide it. How we pay for it and how we get that done is really going to be the obstacle, but we're committed to working with you to do it. For our local services as well, the regional services, this August, we're really going to enhance our local bus service from Carpinteria through Summerlin, Montecito, and into Santa Barbara, because we're rolling up a number of the hours that service hours used to have in our 21 booster that we're temporarily suspending into the 20, which will improve local service for Carpinterians. It'll give us better frequency in the morning during the commute hours for about an hour and again in the afternoon. So that's something I'm really pleased with. Looking forward to the HOV lanes or the freeway to flow a little bit better so that we can get that express service running again from Carpinteria. That's something I think long-term we want to see. So with that concludes my presentation. I want to stay within my time limit. And at this point, I'd like to introduce Margie Kern and Greg Hart, SBCAG.
Good morning. Good morning. This has been great. SBCAG, which is the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments, has been mentioned almost all morning. I'm just curious, how many people out in the audience have heard of SBCAG before you came here today? Wow. Wow, that's incredible. Thank you so much for being informed and knowing all about transportation and why we exist. But I'm just going to go through that for the few hands that weren't up. The SBCAG Board of Directors is comprised of one elected official from each of the 8 incorporated cities in the county and the 5 Board of Supervisors. And we had a couple board members in the audience. Al Clark and Doss was here. Any other board members in the audience? Okay. But SBCAG, in my humble opinion, is one of the only regional forums for elected officials from throughout the county to meet and get together to talk about those issues that we can work collaboratively on. And obviously, transportation is one of the most significant issues, as well as housing and other things that we can basically work together to do better for our residents and our taxpayers and be more efficient. One of our main issues is we are leading the effort to widen the Highway 101 freeway with a new carpool lane all the way from Ventura County up to the city of Santa Barbara. In addition to the new carpool lane, we recently started the peak hour rail service. You know, when I first started this job, one of the first questions people were asking me, is that train ever going to start? And within 1 year, we were able to start that. So obviously, I hope you've all heard about the train service starting, right? I mean, it's been widely publicized. Thank you very much for the TV and advertising that we've had. So hopefully this will help ease the commute for 15,000 employees who drive from Ventura County to jobs in Santa Barbara County each day. We call our long-term strategy to ease this congestion the Highway 101 lane and the train solution. So we got the train, now we're still working on the lane. As Senator Jackson explained, the transportation funding in California has received a huge boost thanks to the new gas tax increase. This new gas tax funding will generate $5.2 billion annually in new state transportation revenue to fix our roads, freeways, bridges, and invest in transit and safety projects throughout our communities throughout California. The unincorporated cities in the county of Santa Barbara will receive nearly $20 million combined in new transportation revenue each year. And this goes on forever. There's no expiration to this. Local streets and roads will receive more than $16 million in new annual funding, and local transit will receive more than $3.2 million in annual revenue to continue the good work that they've been doing all these years. But we need more funding because the price is increasing and the riders are increasing, so we need to provide alternative modes of transportation. In the past few months, the California Transportation Commission, that's the group that makes the decisions on how all these funding would be spent, gave us more than $400 million in this state gas tax revenue in Santa Barbara County. This is the way we're making the lane happen. We are leveraging our local dollars, which the voters of Santa Barbara passed in 2008, the local sales tax measure called Measure A. We're leveraging the $140 million investment locally with $400 million from the state and federal government. And that is because of SB1 and the gas tax that was originally passed. And it will implement the next phase of the 101 multimodal corridor project. I think we have a theme going here. We have a lot of videos. So I'm going to start with my video about the 101 project. So here you go.
We're here at the site of the Linden-Casitas Pass Interchanges project, where construction crews are making tremendous progress on improving the conditions here in Carpinteria. SBCAG and Caltrans are working to relieve congestion and improve mobility in the 101 corridor between northern Ventura County and south Santa Barbara County. Drivers on the 101 freeway experience very high levels of peak hour congestion on a daily basis. Congestion restricts mobility, delays goods movement, impacts quality of life, and compromises the economic vitality of the region, state, and nation. On January 9th, Highway 101 was closed for nearly 2 weeks due to severe mudslides and flooding. Thankfully, the Amtrak train was able to reopen 3 days after the event. This local disaster helps emphasize the importance of our multimodal approach to the 101 corridor. Working together, SBCAG and Caltrans are delivering a suite of improvements as part of the Santa Barbara US 101 multimodal corridor. SBCAG and Caltrans have made substantial investments to deliver 3 of the 4 planned phases of the US 101 HOV widening project. The first 3 phases are now either completed or under construction. SBCAG and Caltrans propose a funding partnership with the California Transportation Commission through Senate Bill 1 to complete the remaining 10-mile gap on the US 101 with high-occupancy vehicle lanes and other multimodal improvements. SBCAG's full multimodal corridor plan includes new peak-hour passenger rail, interregional transit service, and increased coastal access for bicyclists and pedestrians. These improvements are all included in the 101 in Motion plan adopted by the SBCAG board in 2006. The suite of improvements are necessary to provide long-term congestion relief in the 101 corridor long into the future. SBCAG and Caltrans are working in partnership to submit joint applications for the Santa Barbara US 101 multimodal corridor for the SB1 competitive grant programs. The applications include nearly 8 miles of new HOV lanes, a new interchange, replacement of 3 creek structures on 101, improvements in 2 undercrossings, other safety and operational improvements, and new coastal access enhancements, including regional gap closures of the California Coastal Trail. SBCAG will use Regional Measure A sales tax funding to achieve a 30% match for the Cycle 1 request. Together, this comprehensive package of multimodal improvements will increase mobility, facilitate freight movement, encourage mode shift, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and increase access to jobs and housing in the Santa Barbara and Ventura County region.
Of course, that was Greg Hart, our Deputy Director of SBCAG and also City Council person for the City of Santa Barbara, and he's always embarrassed to watch that video, and I'm sure he's all red right now. But with that, SBCAG does do other things, but other than transportation planning, we do promotion of carpooling, vanpooling, taking the bus, ride sharing, bicycling, walking, any way you can get to where you need to go in any mode of possible. And Ken Epperson has been a leader in promoting alternative modes of transportation. So I wanted to give him a few minutes today to allow him to give you an opportunity to give you his overview of what he does and why he does it. So Ken?
So great to be here. I'm reflecting on
the years that I've been doing this work with Traffic Solutions at SBCAG, 15 years, and how much talking and planning we have been doing at that agency, and to see all the stars align and all these amazing projects actually come to fruition within the next few years is pretty amazing. Traffic Solutions, shifting gears a little bit, we don't focus our effort on building things or adding new service particularly. What our emphasis is it's called transportation demand management. No one knows what this means, but what it essentially is doing is we're taking advantage of what we have in place today. So whether that's a bus service that MTD is operating that has maybe some empty seats that we want to fill, whether it's a bike path that's maybe not getting as utilized as we think it could, or an HOV lane that we want to make sure before it's even launched we have carpoolers and buses that are going to be using that facility. I'd like to go ahead and talk a bit more about the commuter rail service from the customer side. So we have this ad that was produced for the new train service. I'd like to show you that.
Hug the coast on your way to work. Early morning train service starts April 2nd from Ventura County to Santa Barbara and Goleta. Arrive at work refreshed and ready for the day. Enjoy a hot coffee. Stay relaxed. Free Wi-Fi sound good? It's time to experience a better way to travel. During April, Traffic Solutions is offering free trial passes. Get details at trafficsolutions.org.
My favorite part of that ad is where the train is just cruising right by all of those cars stuck in traffic. And for me, that's really where the power of this new train service lies. If you want to do the next slide, Bob, please. So as far as the schedule goes, what we essentially did is we moved a train that was not as productive and did not serve commuters, and we moved it to a commuter slot that worked for the early commuter. So this is the schedule here. You can see it leaves Simi Valley at 5:19. Rolls through Carpinteria at 6:34 in the morning, and arrives in Santa Barbara before 7, and Goleta around 7:15, something like that. And that particular train was placed at that slot so that it could complement a pre-existing train trip in the afternoon. And the afternoon trip, starting from the bottom there, return trip south from Goleta, it leaves about 4:25, rolls through Carpinteria at 4:55, and then arrives about 6:41 far south in Simi Valley. When I first saw this schedule, I was concerned. I was like, wow, this is really early. As we got into this, we realized there actually are a ton of people that are starting their day that early, and the reason for that is that the congestion is so horrible that they're willing to get up at the crack of dawn, start their drive at like 5 in the morning just to avoid this traffic. Next slide, please. One of the keys to making this a success was really to make sure that the fare structure was sustainable for the long-term commuters. Any of you have taken the Pacific Surfliner, you know that those one-off trips, maybe down to LA or up north, you're willing to pay more for those single trips, but when you're a commuter, that adds up day after day. So one of our missions at SBCAG and LOSAN as well was to bring down the cost of these passes. So we have a month pass that's $150 if you're traveling from Ventura County, traveling to Santa Barbara County, and $50 for a 10-ride pass. In Carpinteria, it's really exciting. You guys have special pricing here, $80 for a month pass and $30 for a single ride pass, or 10-ride pass. So this is great pricing. Next slide, please. And you can see here, this is where the little red outline is there. That's the kind of the core of this new early morning train service as it looks embedded into all of the other Surfliner trips. Next slide, please. And then you can see the other afternoon train that couples with that early morning train service. But after that train, we also have a later train as well. So those folks that may want to stay in Santa Barbara or Goleta and grab some dinner with a friend or something, or perhaps they work flexible hours and get off later, they can actually take these other trips with that pass. So it's good for any of these trips on the Surfliner. Of course, one of the keys with train service is getting from the train station to where you need to end up. And so we're very pleased working with MTD to provide this free shuttle service. You simply present your Pacific Surfliner pass, and you can get on this great shuttle service. This one right here is the one through downtown, ends up at Cottage Hospital. Next slide. And we have two of those shuttles that serve the Goleta station, one that goes east to Old Town Goleta, and then one that goes west out to Log Me In that area. Next slide. Another way that people can get from the station to their destination is by bike. It's great that the train does accommodate bikes. However, there's only 7 slots that are available for a standard bike to be stored in a special compartment. So we wanted to make sure that not just 7 passengers could take their bike on the train, and we were very pleased when we came to realize that folding bikes actually could serve commuters quite well. If they're the right size, they're considered a piece of luggage like any other luggage, and any passenger can bring that on with them. And so to spark that and the conversation around the folding bikes, we wanted to do a pilot program. So we did, working with the Santa Barbara Bicycle Coalition, doing a great job with that program, an Earn a Folding Bike program. You pay $50 up front. You agree to ride the train. When you've taken the train 40 trips, that bike is yours to continue using in conjunction with the train and any other purpose that you want to use that bike for. So we had 30 commuter enrollees, and I believe 8 or 9 of them actually in Carpinteria were awarded with that program. Also, bike lockers and bike racks. You can store your bike at a station, so you get off the train, unlock your bike from the locker or a bike rack, and then continue on your way. We will have lockers actually in Carpinteria here, likely installed next week, and also additional ones in Carpinteria, and we'll have some lockers in Santa Barbara as well. How many here have ridden the new train service? Okay, so one of the nuances, one of the things that Traffic Solutions was our mission when the new train service was launched was making sure that customers understand how to use the system. People aren't used to train service. This is not Boston. And so we really had to educate our commuters, let them know how you go about buying a pass. First thing you do on Amtrak, create an account. I suggest all of you just go create an account on Amtrak now, and then you're good, and you can, with one click, you can buy passes. So it's very convenient. You can track the number of trips you've used on your 10-ride too. Next, please. And then once you buy a multi-ride pass, then you get an email with a PDF of that pass, and you can present that to the conductors. That's also the same pass that you'd be using for the MTD shuttle, as well as the Coastal Express VCTC service. We've been very pleased with the performance of the train. I will say, with the caveat of the first week, many of us were, a little bit in pain the first few days when we had some delays, but I'm very happy to say that we're now seeing on-time performance of about 96% in May, so that's very good. And that's just the morning service, by the way. The afternoon service, because it departs from Goleta, there's not a lot of places it can get delayed, and so that is running I believe, 100% on-time performance. Actually, go back a second here. I just wanted to talk to the ridership. In the month of April, when we launched the new service, we worked with commuters offering free trial passes, 10-ride trial passes that we offer complimentary to try the service. When we first embarked on this, we thought we would have to maybe we'd have like 300 or 400 or 500 people requesting these passes. Well, we got 1,300 people requesting passes, and so we had to figure out how to roll that out over the course of the month so that we didn't overwhelm the system. And so we did that. You can see here in the picture on this slide, Traffic Solutions staff and a lot of volunteers too, maybe even some people in this room, got up extremely early. We got coffees, we got donuts, and we went down to each of the main stations and greeted these passengers that many of them had never taken the train before, and they were confused. It's night, it's dark, there's no one around at the stations, but we wanted to make sure that they understood how to get the information. So we're really pleased that after
after the last couple months, we're about 140, 45 or so average passengers per day. Our goal when we started this thing was 150 to maybe 200 passengers per day was our goal after the first year, and so we're very pleased that we're very close approaching that goal. Next, please. Everything that you want to know about the train service is on the Traffic Solutions website. People will get confused. If you go to the Amtrak site, there's so many services operated by Amtrak. You'll get lost and you won't find out about the trial passes and so forth. So go to trafficsolutions.org/train, and it's got all this great valuable information there. One of the things I wanted to highlight is if you know people that do commute or are considering using this new service, it's really key to look on the website to find out how you can check the train status, because there are instances where maybe there's an accident on the train and a train could be as much as 45 minutes late just because there's no way they can get up. But if you check the status in the morning before you even go to the station, you can determine whether that's maybe a day you just need to get in your car and avoid waiting at the station. It's a rarity, but it's really handy to have that information. Next, please. Shifting gears a little bit, the Coastal Express, operated by VCTC, and also half of that is paid for by SB-CAG. This is a great service that operates through this corridor on 101 from Ventura to Santa Barbara and Goleta. One of the great services here in Carpinteria that I would like to highlight is that from Ventura to Carpinteria, there's actually 2 round trips that serve commuter schedules quite well. And so that's a really good option for people that live in Ventura but work in Carpinteria. It doesn't serve the Carpinteria to Santa Barbara and Goleta so well. That was intentional because of the existing 21X service that MTD operates. We didn't want to compete with that. It's a great service. So next, and I did want to emphasize too, one thing that is nice is that maybe you find that the early morning train service doesn't work so great for you for a variety of reasons, but you want to take that afternoon train. You can couple that trip, that 2-way trip, with a 1-way Coastal Express and then return Pacific Surfliner trip. It's all one pass. Another program that Traffic Solutions works on is forming van pools. Van pools are about 8 to 12 commuters formed together, and they pay for a van themselves. We are offering a 50% off discount as part of the construction project to reduce the traffic caused by the construction. That people can sign up, they can form a van pool, and we'll pay for half of that van pool through the end of this current phase of the project. Next. We also have a tri-transit program countywide. Anybody who wants to try any of the transit services, contact us. We'll give you a 10 ride to try. And another service I wanted to mention is Smart Ride. It's a third-party website that we use. It's got a variety of great tools. One is a trip planner, so you can put in your origin and destination. It's got all the transit services there. It's also got bike routes that it shows you and driving directions. Also, there's traffic cameras that are accessible on that site as well. There's a commuter calendar, and in general, this site, one of the real powers of this site is we work with employers to develop commuter programs, and these employers often don't know how to do this, and it can be costly, labor intensive. This website is a turnkey solution for those employers that want to create a commuter program and have their employees log their trips, and then that can result in some incentives perhaps that they might earn. 3 or 4 examples here in Carpinteria, businesses that Traffic Solutions has been working with do have really great commuter programs. In fact, I'm very excited about the city of Carpinteria. They are certified as a green agency, and as part of that, they included a commuter program, and so that's coming online, I believe, next fiscal year. LinkedIn, also, they've had a commuter program for many years as they've transitioned through the various different companies. We've been happy that that's continued on. And Procore, of course, you guys are probably very familiar with how fast Procore has been growing, and their parking lot cannot accommodate those cars. They were smart. Very early on, they figured that out. And this picture here on the lower left, that is actually a shuttle that they pay for to get their employees from Santa Barbara to their front door every day. contracting with EOS, one of the bars that has a shuttle down there that's not being used during the day. And then Gigavac, another company that we work with, and they've launched a commuter program. And in fact, they have the most significant daily cash incentive for carpools. It's $7 per day that they'll pay their employees if they carpool 3 or more in a car. So pretty cool. And next slide. And as you roll up the benefits and the impacts that these employers have in relieving traffic in our community, it's quite substantial. They play a really important role. These incentives do make a difference, and they do encourage employees to shift away from driving alone to these other modes of transportation. If any of you take the Pacific Coast Business Times, I believe it's in this next issue, we're going to have an insert in, or this insert, San Luis Obispo and SBCAG Traffic Solutions on the other side, talking about some of these benefits that we get from working with these employers. And with that, these are just some of the websites you can use as resources. And with that, I think back to Margie. Thank you very much.
So we need to collect the comment cards, so if you can pass that to the end, and we'll have somebody come around and pick those up for the questions. But I want to invite Michael Becker up. He is our long-term planning. So we're going to talk about some future technologies that are up and coming that we have to consider. So I think this will be pretty interesting for you. Thank you, Michael.
Good morning. Everybody's been talking about today and what's going on now. I'd like to talk a little bit about what might be going on tomorrow or a little bit further into the future. But my presentation is on emerging technologies in transportation. The presentation is not meant to be all-encompassing. Rather, I just want to give you a taste of what the future might look like. For one thing, we know that the future will not look like today, but the trouble is we don't have a clear picture of exactly what the future might look like. The presentation will provide some examples of what the future, where we might be going, and then I'll highlight some actual advances that lead towards that end. Next slide. As I mentioned, we don't know exactly what the future will look like. There are a variety of scenarios on the future of transportation. I reviewed many of them. I would like to offer some thoughts on what I found to be the most aggressive of the scenarios. I'm not personally endorsing this scenario, and I'm not asking you to endorse it either, but I think it's useful in defining one end of the spectrum. And reality will likely fall somewhere in between where we are today and what I'm about to highlight conveys. The name of the scenario is Rethink X, and if you're interested, you can find it online. So I'll paraphrase briefly. We are on the cusp of one of the fastest, deepest, most consequential disruptions of transportation in history. By 2030, 95% of U.S. passenger miles traveled will be served by on-demand autonomous electric vehicles owned by fleets and not individuals. The disruption will be driven by economics. Using transport as a service, the average American family will save more than $5,600 per year in transportation costs. Next slide, Bob. And a few points from this scenario. The changes, which is not really unexpected, will begin in cities and radiate outwards. It costs about 34 cents to operate a paid-off vehicle, to operate and maintain it, and the scenario claims that it will cost about 16 cents a mile to use an autonomous electric Uber-type vehicle. A private autonomous electric shuttle is expected to cost roughly 5 cents a mile, which is cheaper than existing transit services. By 2030, 95% of passenger miles will be in autonomous and electric vehicles. The rural and the wealthy will be the holdouts. Passenger miles will increase by 50% by 2040 due to new access for the elderly, disabled, poor, and young, as well as price elasticity. And the U.S. vehicle fleet will drop by 80% by 2030 due to the increase in sharing. And also, safety will be vastly improved with 95% fewer on-road fatalities. Okay, so that defines one end of the spectrum. That's what I said is simply regurgitating what came out of a scenario. So next slide, Bob, electrification. Now that I've defined the most aggressive possible future, I'll discuss changes leading towards that future. Electrification is the first of 3 topics that I will cover. Next slide, Bob. It's not just Tesla. In 2017, there were 13 different models on the U.S. market of electric vehicles. Nearly all manufacturers are currently offering an electric vehicle or are planning to in the coming year. Next slide, Bob. The graph above shows the growth of electric vehicles in the U.S. And it does not include the Priuses that you see everywhere. This only includes vehicles that are plugged in. For reference, the U.S. light-duty fleet is about 183 million vehicles. While the electric vehicle share is still relatively small, the rate of growth is very impressive. And if you graph the price of lithium-ion battery capacity in kilowatt hours versus cost, you'd have roughly an inverse of this graph. In 2012, 1 kilowatt hour of lithium-ion battery storage capacity cost about $400. It is now about $150, and it's still going down. And this equates to the battery pack of an early Tesla costing about $40,000 compared to one costing about $15,000 today. Next slide, Bob. Okay, there's a couple of points, so click. There we go. So along this end, the electrification and transportation, last year Volvo announced by 2019 that it will only sell hybrid or fully electric vehicles. Click. France, which was followed by the United Kingdom and China, said they would no longer allow the sale of gas or diesel vehicles to be sold after 2040. Next one, Bob. India has an aspirational target of only selling electric vehicles by 2030. And next one, Bob. And General Motors, which I think is the biggest news, because if GM can do it, then anybody can do it, is going fully electric. They have announced that. I don't think they've given a end date, but by 2023, they plan to have 18 different electric vehicles on the market. Next slide, Bob. And for the sake of time, I'm going to go a little short here because I know Jerry already touched on MTD's electric fleet. But I will say that LA Metro, which is the MTD of the Los Angeles area, recently ordered 95 electric buses. They have a fleet of 2,200 buses, and they have a goal of by 2030 replacing the entire fleet with electric vehicles. That's a whole lot of electric buses. Tesla, as you may have read, is also working on an electric semi-truck. And GM, as part of the announcement I showed on the last slide, mentioned that they will work on a hydrogen fuel cell truck. Next slide, Bob. Okay, moving from electrification to autonomy. Autonomous vehicles is the second of the three topics that I'd like to cover. Next slide, Bob. And this should start playing. There we go. In September of last year, the US DOT released updated guidelines for automated driving systems. The updated guidelines decreased the federal government's role in the oversight and testing of autonomous vehicles, which essentially enables the more speedy development and deployment. In February of this year, the state of California approved the testing of autonomous vehicles on public roads in the state. There are 6 defined levels of autonomy, 0 through 5. Level 0 is a vehicle without any autonomous features, which you might think of your childhood family car. A level 5 vehicle is a vehicle that could operate without a person inside of it. It probably doesn't have a steering wheel or pedals on the ground. You could take a nap or read a book in a level 4 vehicle. What you're watching now is a level 3 vehicle. And level 2, you can find level 2 vehicles already on sale in the US. There's been numerous steps in automation that have already been realized. I'd argue the first goes way back with being cruise control. It partially automates the driving experience. In 2000, we started to see adaptive cruise control, which is now pretty common on all high-end vehicles. In 2015, we started seeing lane keeping assist, which prevents a driver from drifting out of a lane. And if you put those two together, adaptive cruise control and lane keeping assist, you essentially have the start of a hands-off driving experience. We've also seen self-parking features, vehicle summoning, self-lane changing, and it's important to note that all of these individual technologies are not being developed in isolation. They're all being developed for the purpose of this. Yeah. So before I make him go on, I just want you to know that he gets the whole way to his office and he never touches the steering wheel and his feet never touch the pedals. Okay. You can find this on YouTube too if you want. Okay, next slide, Bob. All right, do you remember all the times that you told your kids to share? Well, they're finally listening now. Electrification and automation of transportation will have big impacts, but I think the biggest impacts will be realized by sharing. Sharing essentially capitalizes on the the economic value of and underused transportation assets. And during this meeting, most of us have a car sitting outside that could essentially be used by somebody else while we're here. And if that doesn't sound appealing to you, I'd like to say that it's probably appealing to your kids. All right, next slide. Okay, the first of the three sharing that I'll talk about bike share, car share, and then I'll talk about the TNCs, which is the Uber and Lyft. Bike share systems are emerging technology. The systems provide low-cost and one-way transportation options. They're beneficial for mid-distance trips that are a bit too long to walk and too short to consider driving. They're also useful to complement transit services where there's the issue of the first and last mile. Many of the systems in the U.S. are similar to what you see here is the Los Angeles system. In the last year, there's been a trend moving away from systems that have fixed docks to being either entirely or partially dockless. That is, the bikes essentially lock to themselves. They're designed to be affordable. A user might pay somewhere between $50 and $150 a year for unlimited trips up to a set time limit, usually about 30 minutes. Casual users might pay $1 for a 30-minute trip. And typically the pricing is set so it discourages long-term use. Next slide, Bob. The first modern bike share systems in the U.S. were launched in 2010. By the end of 2010, there were 1,600 bikes being shared by 4 systems. By 2016, there were 55 systems sharing 42,000 bikes, being used for a total of about 28 million times in sum. The average annual growth of bike share systems in the U.S. is a very impressive 72%. UCSB, which I see is in the audience, recently contracted with a bike share vendor for the region's first system. So you'll start seeing them in July on UCSB and in Isla Vista, starting with 300 bikes, and I believe it's up to 1,200 bikes by next January. So that's quite a few bike share bikes coming. The city of Santa Barbara earlier this week approved an ordinance to allow a pilot program for shared electric scooters. Next slide. You can also share cars. Car share companies began to proliferate in the early 2000s and just recently came to Santa Barbara, and they also have a presence at UCSB. The systems are useful for people that can potentially walk to work but occasionally need a car to run errands. And for those people, the cost of using a car share is cheaper than operating or owning and maintaining their own car. Okay, and the next slide, Bob. So TNCs are transportation network companies. They can be typified by the 2 major players, which are Uber and Lyft. Their growth has been incredible, and we're still realizing the impact of these services. Uber is much larger than Lyft, so about 8 times so. So let me give you a few stats on Uber. It was founded in 2009 and started service in 2010, so it's not yet 10 years old. Since its inception, it has grown from just serving San Francisco to operating in 83 countries. In 2016, it provided 2 billion with a B trips worldwide. It now provides about 40 million trips a month in the U.S., and in roughly 8 years, it has grown to be worth about $68 billion. A recent survey of the TNC users in the Bay Area found that 22% would have taken transit if the TNC weren't available, or 19% would have driven alone. TNCs may be partially responsible for the recent downturn in transit ridership. The same study found that 20%, 1 in 5 of the vehicles on the streets of the city of San Francisco during peak hours are Uber or Lyft. It's just a massive amount of cars. There are cross benefits that we are currently seeing between the TNCs and transit. In California, the Livermore-Amador Valley Transit Authority in the Bay Area and the city of Laguna Beach are both piloting with Uber to offer subsidized rides in areas where transit is not by itself efficient. And there are many other examples outside of California. Next slide. Okay, closing thoughts. Click. Segways and smartphones. So the point of this is we don't know where we're going. When Segways came out about a dozen years ago, I think a lot of smart people said that nobody would ever walk again. Obviously they were wrong. And also when smartphones came out 10 years ago, there's some people said they're too expensive, nobody will ever buy them. So where are we going? I don't know. There's a lot of smart people who have a lot of opinions, but we could see that that doesn't always hold the truth. Next click. Each of the 3 things I talked about, the electrification automation and the sharing of transportation assets are not going to occur in isolation. The future will be a mix of all three. Next slide, or next click. It appears that for some of this, that economics has taken hold, that we're seeing a lot of private equity go into particularly the sharing. It doesn't require subsidy. Next slide, or click. And there are externalities that will impact the future. We don't know what's going to happen when, for instance, automated vehicles could potentially replace thousands of jobs. That political pushback may prevent that from happening. So technology may not drive the future, there may be political decisions involved. And next slide. And that is it. Thank you.
Well, thank you, all of our speakers. You've given us great information, food for thought, and we're super excited that you all were here. But at this point in time, I'd like to invite all of our speakers up. We do have some interesting questions, and we have about 15 minutes for Q&A. So speakers, come on up. I have an extra microphone up here for you, and then I'll address, I think each one of you, it seems, has a really good question. So come on up. Could you take that over to the middle there? Okay, great. So, Jerry from MTD, the first question is for you. I ride the bus frequently. Is there a plan for better and nicer bus shelters, protection from sun and rain?
Yes, we do put quite a bit of funding into our bus shelters, and if you were willing to share the exact location, stops, we could absolutely take a look at it, work with the local jurisdiction, and typically a lot of it works that way. We have over 850 bus stops in the South Coast, and we're working with multiple jurisdictions, so we kind of have to take them one by one. But whoever it is, if you want to reach out to me after this, I'd be happy to talk to you about it.
Great, and Jerry, stay close. The next question is for the Santa Barbara Airport. Are you hearing about regional electrical planes that are being delivered?
No. Okay, great. I'd love it, but not so much yet.
Great. Thank you, Hazel. The next question is for city staff. Are we doing any sort of planning for scooters? And I'm not familiar with these terms, bird, lime, spin, and etc. They're encouraging us to be proactive and partner now. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, we've been monitoring the situation in the city of Santa Barbara carefully and hope to learn from their experience in rolling out scooter service. Certainly something that could be a service to our visitors and to residents of Carpinteria if it's done in a safe way.
Great. Thank you. And I'm going to open this question to all of you. We had someone in the audience that is asking where the funding from the SB1 tax bill or tax is really being distributed. And I'm not sure who wants to answer that.
It's complicated. The California Transportation Commission is a board that's appointed by many people, the governor and the legislature. It's a 16-member, 13. And so the statewide organization, they decide the major improvements and how each region gets the money. But there is formula money that's going to each of the cities, as well as the transit districts that they're going to get automatically. And then there's discretionary money that's going to come to SB-CAG to decide how to fund it. So really, it's spread out amongst all of the jurisdictions and agencies to use as they decide what meets their needs. So I think it's actually the fairest way to get things done.
Great. And you may want to answer this question as well. They said, and this is a second question about electric scooters. There's been a lot of discussion of electric scooters. Have you spoken anything or shared anything about bike share instead? And bike share, what are the pros and cons? Can someone address that?
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you for the question. There was actually a bike share study done for the region, so the Santa Barbara South Coast from Carpinteria to Goleta, and identified sort of 2 pilot areas, which were the Goleta Valley and the UCSB campus specifically, and then also downtown Santa Barbara. And actually Carpinteria was identified as sort of its maybe a second phase area of interest because of just the sort of central density, and that could be an area that would be perhaps part of a Santa Barbara system or its own system. And of course, because bike share has, as Michael very eloquently put, gone from very formal, subsidized, docked systems to much less formal, in fact, often with multiple vendors in some cities, dockless systems. I think Carpinteria is in really a good position to potentially take on a bike share system as the city identifies what its needs are and what its desires are for how it would want to manage a system and sort of set the rules of the game before it might allow vendors to come into the city, similar to how Santa Barbara and other jurisdictions would want to manage things like electric scooters. So set the parameters for safety and expectations. But then I think really for employees that are coming into the community during the day, for residents, for visitors, the sort of micro-mobility connections, sort of, you forget that commuting is just one of many trips that you take every day. And most trips are short trips. And the reality is, for all of those short trips, these little ease of connections make them so much more convenient if you can hop on a bike or a scooter or if there's a good transit connection. So I think that's a great additional potential amenity for communities like Carpinteria, and it's such a rapidly changing market that it's really tricky to manage from a governmental perspective, but it's also just ripe with opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Ed. This last question that we have regarding the shuttles here in Carpinteria, and he writes, is there an upgrade to service, I'm trying to read this, regarding the CARP shuttles, upgrade to service frequent online broad-based service, what's happening, do it now, more funding, shuttles. Shuttles is the answer to high traffic. Would you like to answer that? Or comment?
Yeah, actually, I kind of like that question. It leaves it kind of wide open. First of all, it's great to hear somebody really wants additional public transit service. We're certainly committed. We've had conversations with the city of Carpinteria about expanding the shuttle service. As Dave pointed out, to the east and west, we have bus service, fixed route bus service to get people to Montecito, Summerlin. But we know what we're talking about here. I'm a Carpinterian. We're talking about shuttle service, something from the east side that goes down Carp Ave, maybe down to the beach, which the current shuttle takes you as far as the Amtrak station, which I would like to point out is across the street from Island Brew, since Brew Lab was mentioned earlier. But yeah, something that takes you down to the beach. We get that, and I think that's something we need to discuss. The question will be how to pay for it if it's expansion and additional electric vehicles, because obviously the ones we have now are committed to the existing routes. It's all doable. It just takes time, it takes planning, and it takes funding ultimately. But I definitely see trying to do something on a trial basis to see if the ridership is there, but we want to make it something that's manageable too with taxpayer funds.
Great answer. Well, I hope this answered all the questions that you have. I want you to give it up for all of our panelists today. They've been wonderful. Thank you so much. It's up to you now to go and share this with your colleagues and your visitors and whatnot. I want to say that the Chamber prides itself on providing educational forums such as this, and also providing access to our local, regional, state legislators, which we do a fine job of. So just check us out on our chamber website. This information will go on our website. It has also been filmed for Channel 21, our local Carpinteria station. So just a few parting thoughts. Have a fabulous Friday. Carpool if you can on the way home, and take a nice bike ride this weekend. So have a lovely day. Let us know if you need anything.